Hi, everybody. It's Deirdre Fay. And you guys, I just want you to know we are lucky to have Syd and Neil here. Let me give you their bios. But we are going to be talking about fierce compassion today. So let's start with Syd, who you see. Wave, Syd, say hi. That's Syd.
Hi.
He has an academic background in trauma psychology and more recently in compassion-based therapeutic approaches. He's worked in the NHS in England as a consultant clinical psychologist with older and adult clients in secondary and tertiary mental health settings in North Essex. He's currently full-time in private practice. Now, Syd has also practiced a wide range of martial arts for the last two decades, more recently focusing on Wing Chun Kung Fu. Am I saying that right, Syd?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Wing Chun Kung Fu and mixed martial arts. And Dr. Neil Clapton, hello. There he is a clinical psychologist working in the NHS also in England with adults with complex mental health issues and secondary mental health services in Swindon, specializing in the provision of compassion-focused therapy, CFT, and dialectic behavior therapy, which is DBT. A large proportion of his clinical work is with individuals who experience significant emotional dysregulation and interpersonal difficulties related to the frequent expression of rejecting anger and hostility. We'll need to hear more about that, Neil. Mm-hmm. And Neil spent much of his early, middle childhood and adolescence practicing the martial art of Taekwondo, culminating him being awarded a first-degree black belt at the age of 13. Otherwise known as a child prodigy, right, Neil? So, you guys, let's dive into this. The importance of a fierce compassion, which is the name of the program that you've created, right?
Yes, it is. Yes. So what we've developed, we've called Fierce Compassion Martial Arts. And yeah, as you rightly say, I think the fierce element's been very important to the two of us over the last several years, really, as we've been discussing the further development of this.
And how come? Like, where'd you guys come up with the idea, and tell us more about what it's all about?
Well, fierce, certainly from a martial perspective, sort of translates as with great energy and power. So there are sometimes some mistranslations of the word fierce, that it connotes aggression, which it doesn't in the martial arts. Okay, so we're talking about something that is extremely with great energy and with great power.
Say more about that. You maybe, Syd, you want to add on there?
Yeah, sure. As Neil said, in a way, it's fiercely, so it's with great vigor. I think what we're trying to make a separation away from is the idea of aggression. Neil and I both come from quite a traditional martial art background, and aggression is largely frowned upon. Essentially, it's trained out of the practitioner rather than trained in. So in more modern, particularly very mixed martial arts that you might see on television as sport, the idea of aggression is usually the more the better. The styles that we come from, the idea is that you train with dedication, fierceness, passion, but always in the service of doing as minimal harm as possible. So it's the vigor, the energy, as Neil says, that we're after. That's really where we landed, I think.
So in some ways you're talking about channeling the energy, right? So that we all have this life force inside of us, and sometimes it's a lot, and it can come out as aggression, but you're talking about how to channel, is that right? Channeling it so that it can move in a certain direction?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at things like Wing Chun, Kung Fu, there's a lot of attention given to physical sensitivity. So you'd be trying to link hands with somebody, feel their force or energy, they would say chi, misdirect that or redirect that for your own purposes, so that you might affect a takedown or whatever it might be. So we're interested in what plays out in the therapy space in terms of anger, but specific other emotions as well between the client and therapist, and how we might use our ability to tolerate those states as a vehicle for therapeutic change. So really therapist development through things like martial arts and practices.
And I think anything that we do within that is about being able to do it with courage, confidence and conviction. So being able to exercise your compassion in many different forms with those kind of attributes, really, to be able to do things strongly, with courage and with conviction.
And do you do that, Neil, in the office one-on-one, or are you doing this in a group setting, or how are you guys delivering this?
Well, our intention at the moment is to run some workshops to help train therapists and experience what it's like to embody compassion in this way through the martial arts, and then bridge that across to what happens in the therapy space. So what we really want to do is use traditional martial arts to help people have this embodied experience of what that might be like in the therapy room. So how that might help them tolerate quite a lot of distress, both in their clients and in themselves. Find that point of centeredness that will give you, will maximize your chances of responding in the most compassionate way possible.
So give me an example. It's still a little obscure to me, so I need a little groundedness here. So if I was in a situation and filled with a lot of anger or hostility, what would I do?
So do you mean as the therapist or the client necessarily?
Maybe both.
Maybe both, yeah. I suppose our intention would be as a client, you would then experience the therapist who felt very grounded, who could stay attuned and wouldn't necessarily become overly distressed or in some way unhelpful because of the power, vigor, if you like, of your anger or your shame or your sadness, whatever it might be. Right. So what we're aiming to do, if we can, through martial arts practices, stance work, partner work, sensitivity drills, give people an embodied sense of what it might be like to train in the martial arts, and therefore practice on a regular basis physical confrontation with another and repair within the relationship afterwards as well. That seems to be a very strong feature in most traditional martial arts. Most martial artists train to help each other in a very vigorous way. And in doing so, we believe that allows you something unique in a way to keep within the moment, relational depth, contact, whatever it might be, in therapy, in those particular therapeutic encounters. So what we're hoping for is a different experience of therapy with a more grounded therapist, perhaps.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. So that if I was coming as a client and I was filled with a lot of energy of some kind, probably negative energy, even negative self-criticism or negativity turned on myself, you as a therapist, either one of you or both, would be able to hold that and not be reactive to my expression. And then through that, and it's so true in the attachment world, we know that allows a transformation to begin happening, because when I realize that you're not shaming me or horrified by me or scared of me, that already begins that metabolism between us, and that allows me to be able to hold and tolerate it. Am I getting that correctly?
Absolutely. It's very much links back to you being a safe container, and being able to be with all of that energy without reacting to it in a negative way. So you can be with the energy of whatever's there, work with it, and start to transform it. And we through our experience, believe that martial arts it's not the only way, but we think it's a really, really powerful way for people to experience this and embody it. And there's a lovely phrase that one of the papers we reviewed for one of our papers we've just written, that's in press, called it was about Aikido and about this concept of somatic metamorphism. So this idea that the martial arts gives you this embodied sense of being able to approach conflict in this way, and that is transferable to non-martial situations. So you, by experiencing resolving conflict in this way, you can transfer that into your day-to-day life, and not just the therapy room, but the day-to-day life as well.
So in many ways, what you guys are doing is creating these new neural networks, new practices, creating a new normal inside. If I realize that this energy that's coming up can be held, and actually my skin can hold it and can be held in relationship, then I'm just going to get more familiar with that moving through rather than bottling up and acting it out or acting in.
Yeah, entirely. For well, many years really, I used to train individually with a kung fu master, and the training would largely involve a thing called chisao, which is where you're linking arms and you're feeling each other's energy to find a gap to then come through for an attack or a counter. And I found quite quickly you then become very familiar with other people entering your personal space. It doesn't become a problem because it's so trained within you. So in a way, yes, you are picking up an ability to stay with somebody else's energy, not be too phased by that, and hopefully respond in a helpful way. Myself and this master, a chap called Frank Roach, absolutely phenomenal martial artist, would often talk about how this can help in terms of managing anxieties. This can help in terms of low mood states. So he had no formal evidence of that, but it's something that we would discuss quite a lot in the lessons, and then something that Neil and I have talked about ever since. Neil's background is in Taekwondo, which is quite different from, say, Wing Chun. They just look very different, and yet the overlap between the two is so intense, really, and so massive that it led us to think, hang on, this probably applies to most of the traditional martial arts, and there's something important there that we can garner, and again, try and bring in as a novel way of therapist development. I think that's what we're after.
Fascinating. So the workshops you want to do are about creating skills for therapists to be able to sit with it and be with it. But there's something you were talking about even just now, you brought it up again, Syd, about feeling into the other's energy and beginning to see where there's like a hole in their field. Is that what, am I saying it right? Like,
yeah, in a way there would be a defensive structure in Wing Chun, an on guard or a positioning of the hands, and it's been thought through in such a way that it minimizes the opportunity for anybody else to come through. And you can disrupt that by your own movements and therefore give you an advantage. So we'll be talking about those ideas in the workshop, particularly linking hands with another, what it feels like to touch another. As they come forward, can you feel that force? Is it coming, as Neil would say, into your center? Do you need to disrupt that and turn off in one way? And we would say we find that we do this all the time with clients anyway. We might be doing it verbally, but those same skills seem to lend themselves to how do I skillfully reposition myself all the time to the emotional interplay or transference in the therapy room. And I think our experience was, as trainee clinical psychologists on a very good UK clinical psychology training and beyond, is that really that's not focused on enough as part of our clinical training. So it feels like you get trained in lots of models, lots of therapy experiences, but that opportunity to really sit with the distress of another and respond helpfully without being overwhelmed yourself, we think we've both benefited from our martial arts practices in outside of that context. So
this is great. Neil, were you going to add to that? Because I was just got an email from somebody this morning asking about this very thing. You know, how do we distinguish between, you know, that kind of energy coming at us, and how do we work with that?
Yeah, and I think lots of traditional martial arts really help you be able to absorb some of that energy in a really helpful way and redirect it. So I think in the workshops, what we hope people will experience is this, you know, being able to take a position where you're able to protect yourself, but not be too defensive. So you can cope with whatever comes your way, but then you can also move forward and offer something like compassion, okay, which might be resisted. So what we want you to experience is an embodied experience of that process, you know, the back and forth of what happens in therapy, of the when we come forward with something, somebody is going to bring something back to you, somebody's going to bring some kind of resistance. And martial arts teaches you how to hang in there, stay in there, work with that and redirect it in an affiliative way. So pretty much all traditional martial arts are about non-violent conflict resolution. They're not about inflicting suffering on other people. They might be halting, so that's another thing that we talk about, you know, is as well as being helpful and not harmful, your compassion might need to be halting at somebody sometimes to stop them from doing something that's going to cause them or other people suffering. But that's another element to what martial arts can help us in an embodied way do in therapy. Is like, when do we exercise that perhaps more dynamic way of trying to help somebody halt what they're doing, perhaps when they can't be available for themselves.
That's a really important point. I guess I was thinking of that in the beginning, you know, before we were even talking, is when is that fierce compassion an intervention of a no?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And how hard that is for so many people.
Absolutely. There was an example of that the other week, which I was sharing with Syd, where I had to be very firm in a no in terms of what somebody was going to do in the therapy room, and be able to tolerate what came back at me and work us back to a point where we could reaffiliate and resolve the conflict in a constructive rather than destructive way. And in the end, they tolerated it and accepted it. And I was reflecting on this with Syd. You know, my training has definitely massively helped me with that, you know, clinically. But I think what we both agree that's really helped us in life and in the therapy space is that martial arts has really entrained that ability to do that within us in a way that I don't think we've managed to experience anywhere else. So that's our passion for it, really, is that we, you know, this is our experience of how it's been really, really helpful for us in really high conflict situations, and we want to share some of that experience and wisdom with other therapists, because we believe it's going to be really, really helpful in you being able to exercise compassion in the way you just said as well. Sometimes when you need to be quite assertive and halting and saying no.
I'll just add to that, if I may. There's a paper Neil and I have talked about a few times at the turn of the century, a chap called Twemlow, who writes about rolling with the punches. So a therapist that seems to have life experience of adversity themselves and who has been able to roll with the punches may be in some way more available for clients. And again, we would say that the martial arts, because of the confrontation and then reaffiliation process all the way through training, is a very good training ground for that. So I suspect we both say that we don't feel as fazed by therapy encounters, and can relentlessly try and come back to some kind of emotional ready position where we are continually trying to be back on center and available for the other. And I think it's experienced in quite a different way. So I feel more engaged in therapy because of this, because I feel I can offer more of myself as part of the experience in a genuine and authentic way, and still feel safe as a therapist at the same time. Again,
what do you think made the difference, Syd, in that?
I think it's, as I said, probably for me, it was the Wing Chun and the linked physical contact with another who was far more skillful than I, who would continually just take things above my skill level. You know, we might think of a zone of proximal development, if you like, such that I could experience struggle, but in a very contained way. So I might be, I don't know, disappointed with my performance, let's say, in a training session, and the Kung Fu master would sit and talk with me about that, my expectations, how I felt it went. Or if there was some physical contact that was more than we expected, then again, that would be dealt with in a very affiliative way. You know, let's sit and try and understand that. And those kind of experiences over time, certainly over the years, seem to build up into, it's actually okay. To struggle with anger in the therapy space is okay. I certainly don't look forward to that, but certainly don't shy away from either, if you see what I mean.
Right.
And the training for... Sorry, we get too excited. We get carried away.
Good, that's good.
The training philosophy of many martial arts and dojos, you know, they talk about this concept of indomitable spirit. So that idea that your spirit, no matter what happens and no matter what comes your way and what you experience, your spirit cannot be crushed and destroyed. You can still come back from that. that's been really, really helpful to me in both in life and in therapy. I think is that no matter what comes your way, there is a way to come back towards that, grow from it, learn from it. You know, it builds in you this essence that you can withstand whatever comes your way, but in a really engaged way. You know, not in a disengaged way, in a really engaged way. I don't know what you think about that, Steve, but I think that's been really important for me.
Well, we've talked at length, haven't we? It's something we're trying to include in the workshops. The idea of training in this way can add to your sensitivity. We believe it can add to your sense of empathy, certainly your distress tolerance. So there's a really good immediate overlap with some of the attributes that we're trying to train in compassion-focused therapy all the time.
Absolutely. There's so much in the martial arts that works across those two psychologies of compassion in a really radically embodied way.
The other thing that I find is so interesting, and certainly I've explored that in bringing attachment theory heightened up in an embodied way with compassion-focused therapy, is the components you're talking about, having these fundamental attachment needs met. Guidance and mentoring, you know, the way you're talking about being with your teachers, and then with a client is being able to make things into small digestible steps so people can take those steps forward and really develop themselves. Or, you know, like you said, Syd, if there was some physical contact that felt uncomfortable, then to sit and talk about it, to have somebody, a safe other, that these things can be discussed with, which is where so many people have attachment ruptures in their life. There were multiple times when you talked about these fundamental needs being met. It's very similar. It's definitely an attachment-based model where people then can repair the structure inside themselves. So it's less around, and I think this is true with all the ancient wisdom traditions, is that the first level was all about building character. And then there were the practices on top of it of reaching higher states of consciousness. But the first levels were all about the structure building.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I agree. Of all the martial arts I've done, the traditional ones have always insisted on a period of quite prolonged dedicated practice before a student's then brought into not just the more advanced techniques, but the partner work or anything like this. So you work on yourself first. You demonstrate your commitment to the art you're trying to develop. You show good character, which is very important throughout the martial arts as well. And then you develop skill. So it's all about that grounding first. Very, very important. What you're saying about rupture work as well, Neil and I have had several conversations about confrontation and withdrawal ruptures within therapy, and how in some ways what we're looking at is more of the confrontation end of things. I don't know, pessimism or conflict or cynicism or some kind of remark. So not just a physical manifestation of anger, a large expression by somebody, but the micro expression as well.
Right.
Again, if we can offer something reliable to the other as a container or safe base in some way, then that affords micro repair within the relationship. And of course, that's such a big thing within CFT, we would say.
Right.
Again, martial arts leads us to feel able to occupy that space and stay there, hopefully skillfully. That's what we're looking for.
And the other thing we've talked about recently is that martial arts really helps you with that ability to rapidly switch motivational states. You both, when you're in sync, you can have this experience of shifting from perhaps a threat-based defensive motivational state very quickly to a much more cooperative, affiliative one where you can repair. That happens very, very quickly in the martial arts. But you know, if you think about sparring, and how you end those encounters as well, they're rapid shifts in motivational states, and that's really, really important for conflict resolution.
The other piece that I think you guys are bringing forward, which I feel is essential, is understanding the energy. Whatever, we don't even have language for it. But it's not a cognitive understanding; it's a felt body understanding of what's going on, almost like learning the subtext of a communication. And that's, I think, where people get so screwed up in relationships, is words are saying one thing and there's this whole other level going on underneath, and people can't reconcile that cognitive dissonance. And so that you guys are taking the time to really work with that and help people understand that and be in relationship around that, I think is so important.
I think when Neil mentioned earlier about radically embodied compassion, that's very much what we're after, some kind of synchronization, really, neuroception or behavioral synchrony. It's an experience of another who is able to move with you through those emotional states, not in a crowding way so that you're overwhelmed in some way, but as just a partner in a way, somebody who can be with those states. And I think what we've found before, certainly if therapeutic encounters have felt too much, there's disconnection right at the time where you need a connected other to be with you. Yeah. Again, martial arts is all about that. As Neil says, in sparring encounters, you might be sparring with 10 or 15 people in a lesson, maybe for 2 or 3 minutes each. It would then be a bow or some signal of respect, and then on to the next partner again. So you're constantly being asked to shift between these motivational states. That's gold dust in terms of therapy training.
Right.
Therapy encounter with one person over 15 minutes it's an incredibly long time to really get into some relational depth, some real moments of meaning.
Well, you guys
nodding away there, sage-like.
Neil with his beard.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yes, master.
It's exciting stuff you're doing. I really like it. And is there a way? I'm just going to add this other piece of thinking through. Is it different? Well, I guess in our, it's not just gender specific, but how do we confront those different power structures, male, female, non-gender specific, binary? Because that comes into play so much around physicality. Is that something that you're thinking about and exploring?
I think that we would talk about male, female. I think we're interested in ideas of totality. So rather than male or female, yin or yang, etc., and the shifting interplay between the two. So again, just to use Wing Chun as an example, it's a system, 400-year-old Kung Fu system that was designed by a woman.
Is that right?
Yeah, for exactly that reason. It's very short, very compact. It doesn't rely on strength in the way that some other styles might do. So it's about very much responding to the energy that's come, being able to stay within the pocket, if you like, or stay within the distance of that, and to be able to strike effectively. So very short, very percussive, very fast. So we are looking at those, and I think by being pan style, what we're trying to find is how each of those different styles deals with energy. Judo and jiu-jitsu are quite different in some ways, although very similar. Greco-Roman wrestling, again, stand-up wrestling, deals with energy and force in a different way. The more striking arts, taekwondo, karate, Wing Chun, all deal with energy in a completely different way. So that's something we're going to explore with people in the workshops, really, as much as we are able to.
Right. And so it's less about, it really is more about the energy rather than the externals of any kind.
Yeah. There is a big tradition of internal and external energy as well within just martial arts generally. So Tai Chi and some of the other Qi Kung forms are very much about developing internal energy. Some of the Kung Fu forms translate that into external energy. And then you've got styles, as I said, more Japanese, Korean styles that all have ideas about Qi or Ki within them, but will express them in slightly different ways.
Well, you guys, I'd like to keep chatting, but I know we have to end. So I think it's fascinating, and I personally can't wait to take a workshop with you and really deepen my understanding.
That would be an absolute joy. Look forward to it. We can blend some yoga and some martial arts. That would be
plan it all. It's all energy at that point.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
We've got a workshop coming up in February in Derby in the UK. it's being advertised, etc., etc. If anybody is in the area and is able to come, we would very much look forward to meeting you.
And let me know the link, and I'll make sure people get it.
If you go to www.fiercecompassionmartialarts.com, you can learn more about what we've talked about today on there. And also, if you go to the news section, the workshop is advertised there, but it's also advertised on the Compassionate Mind Foundation's website.
Great. And the direct website is fiercecompassionmartialarts.com.
That's the one.
Yay! Thanks, you guys. Thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
Absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you.
Care.